If you struggle to communicate effectively in meetings, you need to watch this entire video. We got the chance to interview for the second time Chris Fenning. He's a communications expert. He's trained over 135,000 people on communicating effectively. He's sold more than 100,000 books on communications. I have read all of them. They're highly, highly practical, and I highly recommend you check them out. He's also won 11 awards for his communication training ability. And he has a new book on effective meetings. So we're going to dive deep into this video to help you understand three things. Number one, how to run effective meetings, whether you're a manager or somebody who's even sitting in a meeting at a junior level. How do you communicate effectively in meetings, and what it takes to have productive meetings. I really hope you like this entire video. Let's get into it. Hello, and welcome. I am here with somebody who some of you might have already seen before because we've made a ton of videos with him as well as on his book. One of his books has become the hallmark of my communications learnings as well as teachings. It's called The First Minute. But this time we're not here to talk about the first minute. In fact, the person that I'm talking about has written a new book also around effective communications, specifically focused around effective meetings. And I have a ton of questions to ask because they're not only in my mind, but these are questions that I get asked all the time from working professionals, that how do you really have productive meetings? And before I dive into the techniques and the practicality and all the juice of what we're about to get into, I just want to ask you, Chris, what made you want to write this book? I believe it's your fourth book, if I'm not mistaken. Correct me if I'm wrong.
It's actually my sixth book, but some of the
Sixth
others
book.
are not as well known. But yet, four in the business communication
In the
series.
business communication. Okay, perfect.
Yes.
Good. Gotcha.
And why did I write it? Well, it was one of the questions I got asked most often if I would go into a client or work with someone one-to-one and we'd be working on a communication topic. I could guarantee at some point meetings would come up, and then somebody would talk about, they sort of come into a session and say, oh, I've just had this terrible meeting, or I'm dreading the next meeting that I'm going to, or more often than not, I'm trying to find time, but I can't because there are so many darned meetings. So it was just such a ubiquitous topic that I realized there had to be better ways to do it. And there are loads of great books out there, but none of them quite delivered what I wanted. So as an author, it seemed like a good idea to write the book that I wanted.
Fantastic. And I believe that you have attended about approximately 15,000 meetings so far. Am I correct? And so I think you would be the right person to ask, regardless of your book, that what is it? Firstly, tell me what makes an unproductive meeting, and what are some small things that managers can start to do to shift them towards a more productive lens. So let's start. I know those are two loaded questions. So let's start with the first part, which is that what really makes a meeting unproductive?
Yes, and there is one root cause, one defining characteristics of unproductive meetings, and there's only one. The meeting doesn't produce what it's meant to in the time. And that is, and if I was to expand it a little bit, I'd say it doesn't get closer to the thing it's meant to produce. And that underpins all the kinds of bad meetings we have. And there are lots of reasons for this happening. People dominating conversations, poor planning, an alarming number of meetings that start without a clear idea of what's going to be produced. I mean, that in and of itself is going to cause complete failure. If you don't know where you're going, how on earth are you going to get there? So that is the real basis for bad meetings, is not knowing what that time and those people are meant to try and produce as an output for the meeting.
That makes sense. A follow-up on this, though, is that I have been part of meetings that do get us closer to the end result. But after the meeting is done, and I look back at it and I think that, this 90-minute meeting could have happened in 30 minutes and still got us equally as close to the result that we were hoping for. So what do you have to say to that? That a meeting does qualify in terms of what you're saying, that it got us closer to our aim, but it still felt like it took a lot of productive time out of our hands. So what would you say to
Yes,
that? How do we spot? Because I think that becomes the tiger in the grass, right? So how do we really spot that?
it does. So there's a phrase, and I forget where it came from now, which which bothers me because I should have these things committed to memory. But sort of an activity will expand to fill the time that's available. And you can have a 10-minute conversation fill an hour if you allot an hour for that conversation. And so why did that 90 minutes take 90 minutes rather than 30? Probably a little bit of lack of preparation. That would be the main thing, not recognizing that it was possible to achieve that thing in much less time. And the second reason would be an unwillingness to recognize, oh, we can do this thing in a short amount of time, so let's do that and then move on. So it's just allowing that conversation and those activities to expand into the time that's available.
Got it. That makes sense. And just for people to have a good, so people love checklists, right? So that they have something to go by. And a lot of the times we say that, oh, that meeting could have been an email or it could have been a text message. Do you have any sort of checklist that you can give us which can help us determine whether this thing needs to be a meeting, an email, or just a text message?
Yes, yeah, there are sort of three questions we can ask ourselves. One is, do I know what I want to achieve in this meeting? And if the answer is no, please stop. Like, don't do anything else until you work out actually what the purpose and output of that meeting are going to be. So, do you know what you're going to try and achieve? The second thing is, amazingly, does it need other people's input? Because quite often we invite people to meetings or we get meetings together that don't require input or collaboration. They're just a delivery of information. Those info only style meetings where it's just one way with no opportunity for questions, no interaction at all. That could have been an email. So do I know what I want? Does it require other people's input? And then the third thing is, does it need a real-time conversation or interaction? And to make this real, I'll give an example. It's if you're reviewing a list to prioritize a list of items or tasks, does that need a conversation? Or can somebody review the list in their own time and provide their input? So you can do it by email or on a Slack channel or sort of asynchronously, not do it at the same time. And if the answer to all three or any of those is no, I don't know what I want, I don't need other people, and it doesn't need to be real time, you've really got to question, does it need to be a meeting? And usually the answer is going to be no.
Got it. So that's a good checklist to have. That I think this is a great point that many times we think of announcements and we think of them as being meetings, but those can actually become an email blast or it can become something to put on Slack. And
They can, yeah.
hmm.
But
A-
they don't need to be. This is the area where I get the most pushback on when I say something like info only meetings. And I always, it's a very bold statement, but 9 out of 10 times, I get people coming back and saying, oh, but what about company town halls? Or what about telling my team about something? And I'll challenge that by saying that isn't an info only meeting. It's not a one direction delivery of information because there's usually an opportunity for questions or discussion, or people need to do something with that information and have an opportunity to challenge it, question it, enhance it. That is a valuable use of time. There is a purpose, there are activities. But if the whole meeting could be replaced with, hey, I'm reading from this thing, nobody interrupt me, I'm not taking any questions, send your questions by email afterwards. That's not a meeting. Just record a video and send that out instead.
And when it comes down to, so this checklist is handy, right? And are there any, it gives me an understanding of what to avoid in terms of when I'm thinking of organizing a meeting. Is there anything else that you have to say in terms of any types of meetings that should be avoided at all costs, that keep happening and we should be like, okay, this is not really a meeting. Am I, and if the answer is the same as what you said in terms of that, hey, if it doesn't get past the checklist, then it should be avoided, then that's fine. But is there something else or something beyond that I should know of?
There is, but I'm intrigued if you have something in mind. Is there something you're thinking of where a certain experience you're having that shouldn't be a meeting?
Yeah, so I love that you read my body language. So the when I was working in advertising, a lot of the meetings that we had were around brainstorms. We had to, I used to work in the presentation team, so we had to pitch ideas to clients all the time. And so one problem we faced, which I already asked you, right? That in a brainstorm, we would sit and we would come up with the ideas that were required, but they would take 3 hours in the meeting, and the
Yeah.
ideas were done in 90 minutes itself. So we covered that. The second part is that a lot of the times, the person who was in charge of the creative department or the sales team, whoever was in charge of that particular project, would call a meeting to simply talk about certain factors that, for example, X, Y, and Z needs to be covered in this pitch, or here's the brief that we need to follow. Let's read it together. And so on one level, it did help with the fact that, okay, yeah, we all can see each other, and we are all aligned on what's to be done. But did this really have to be a meeting as such? Those are
Yeah,
the
does it
kind
have
of
to be
things which are
scheduled
happening. Yeah.
time? I
Yeah,
want
yeah,
everybody
because
to sit and read together. Yeah.
yes, yes.
There, there are a couple of things in response to that, and the second one I'll talk about is the Jeff Bezos meeting, which gets a lot of meeting format, which gets a lot of headlines. But you started off by saying like a brainstorming meeting, and that is, if anyone's watching this on video, I had a very, very big reaction to that word. I do not like brainstorming. I think as a concept, brainstorming from all businesses because as an activity, it is one of the least efficient ways to come up with ideas. It's a terrible method. There are many other writing another book and doing a card deck of meeting activities, which came out of the Effective Meetings book, was what are the activities we do in a meeting to achieve the purpose and produce an outcome or produce a particular output. And brainstorming is one of the things that gets thrown around a lot. And it's terrible. It gets dominated by the loudest voices, or sometimes just one voice. Once an idea is thrown out, it introduces bias, so everybody focuses on that idea at the exclusion of others. It's verbal rather than written, so the first thing that gets shouted out affects everything that comes afterwards. It's so rather than railing and bashing on it, which I could do for some time, here's a change. Do something called brainwriting instead. And brainwriting is ask the question because the purpose is to come up with ideas. So get the group of people together and give them 2, 3 minutes to write down all of their own ideas. And you can do this on paper, you can do this on a digital whiteboard, you can do it in a shared space. But then you've got everything written down and you've got a lot of independently produced ideas. Then you can have the discussion about how deep do we want to go in them? How do we prioritize them? How do we decide between them? Those are all other good activities to do in the meeting. But get away from brainstorming and having one person doing it. Get people to write it down, and then you've got your basis of ideas to have a discussion from. So that was the first bit. I'll pause for a moment before going into the Amazon Bezos story.
No, no, no. That's fantastic. I think I don't have any follow-up questions on that. Please, I would love to hear the Jeff Bezos thing as well.
Oh, okay. So we were saying like those this came from your experience of let's all get together and read the brief together. Let's read this document together, which is a little bit like story time in school. It doesn't seem very effective. And one of the really unfortunate things when somebody gets famous and creates a big company is their method becomes the gold standard. It worked for Amazon, so we should all try and do it. And Jeff Bezos has repeated many times in interviews on stages around the world the Amazon meeting methodology. That's what he calls it, that's what it gets called. And the methodology is this. When the executives come to a meeting with a topic, they must write a 6-page brief about that topic. Then the first 15 minutes, everybody sits in silence reading the brief, making their notes, and the rest of the meeting is about discussing that idea and so on. Now, there are a lot of problems with this as a method. I'm going to start with something good. It works for them in that situation, and it's brilliant. But that situation is unlike 99.99% of the work that the rest of us do. The reason this method works for them is you've got Bezos and the executives of one of the largest organizations in the world probably thinking about a strategic decision, not talking about whether we change from red to blue in a design brief. And so when they're looking at strategic decisions, of course, a 6-page memo on what it is, what the market impact would be, growth opportunities, all that stuff needs to be in there. And execs are busy, so they should read it. Makes a lot of sense for that group and that purpose. For the rest of us, could you imagine writing a 6-page brief for every meeting you attend? That would be just such a waste of time, and it's the wrong tool for the job. So bad advice comes from sort of good outcomes. So if anyone is in a company where there's this big drive to do the Bezos way, to do the Amazon meeting format, just suggest that perhaps you're not in an executive board meeting from a massive multinational, and that might not be the right activity to achieve what you need.
Fantastic. Just by the way, for people listening, there is an entire podcast we had done with a lady called Bhavya, who is from Amazon, who went very deep into this entire aspect that Chris is talking about. And what I got away from the meeting is that, yes, it does work very well for Amazon. And they tend to spend a lot of time writing these documents. Like every employee spending sometimes their whole workday is dedicated to prepare for a meeting because of these documents. So if you're in a company that's not Amazon, there is a debate that whether this will work for you or not. And it's important to understand the distinction that what, as Chris mentioned, what the outcome of your meeting is supposed to be, and does it warrant that amount of time and effort to follow the Bezos
Yes.
method?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, hopefully it wasn't rude to, to your prior
No, no,
guest.
no, not at all.
Um, and
Not at
lots of
all.
different ways to do things. That's the right tool for the job. And that is where, like my methods, I wouldn't suggest they are used for board meetings. There's elements in there that would definitely help, but it's not the right tool set. This stuff in the book, Effective Meetings, is for the meetings that fill our calendars day in and day out each week, with the goal of trying to have fewer of them.
Fantastic. Chris, one of the from I'm referencing your. I know this podcast is not for that book, but I will reference it one more time. In your book, The First Minute, there are two frameworks which I use and I teach. Yes, it's right behind him on the right book. And there are two frameworks which I implement and I also tend to teach, which are the CIK framework and the GPS framework. And
Mm.
I'm not going to get into what those are at the moment. We've made multiple videos on those already. But there is a framework in this book as well, which I'm really excited to talk about. And now this will get into I know a lot of you are trying to listen for the technical and the practical tools that Chris can give us. So let's dive into them and let's discuss
Yeah.
the framework TPO. I hope I got that correct. And please tell me
Yes.
what it is and why is it such a game changer for meetings?
TPO, 3 letters, 3 words that make every part of a meeting better. There is one thing for people to take away from this podcast, from this conversation, it's topic, purpose, and output. These 3 things enable you to plan a meeting, introduce a meeting, keep a meeting on track, end it clearly, and makes the follow-up afterwards clearer and easier. Every part of a meeting, from like concept through to like you finish the meeting and you're doing stuff with the output, all of it is made better if you have those 3 things: topic, purpose, and output.
Fantastic. So let's dive into it. Could you give us an example of any one meeting where this can be? So let's take an example of any particular meeting, right? You can paint out any
Mhm.
particular situation or scenario. And if I am the executive or the manager who's supposed to plan the meeting, how can TPO
Mhm.
help me decide A, whether I should have the meeting or not, and B, if I do have to have it, then how can this framework help make it more productive?
Yeah, okay. So let's say that you're, as you say, the manager of a team, and you want to talk about changes to the budget. Fairly common thing that happens. So the meeting topic could be team budget for the fourth quarter. The purpose is to review budget changes and update our plan. and the output is an updated plan. So they connect, but you have to produce the actual plan, not just talk about it. So you very clearly say, here's the topic. So you're drawing a line around what we are going to talk about and what we're not. We're talking about, and it could be, we're going to talk about this project timeline. We're going to talk about the team budget. We're going to talk about a particular issue that's affecting a client. Whatever your topic is, that's the first thing. Here's the space we're focusing on in this meeting. The purpose of the meeting is to, and then you're looking to produce something, update something, decide something. Be very clear, we're going to do this activity. And at the end, we will have an output. We will have a list of ideas. If you've been brainwriting instead of brainstorming, a list of ideas, a prioritized list, a response plan to a risk or an issue that's occurring, an updated budget, a decision. That's an output in and of itself. If you can write it down or print it out, that is an output. And so whatever you're working on, it can be defined, and whatever you're doing in a meeting can be defined as the topic of the meeting, the purpose of the meeting, and then that output.
Fantastic. So I think TPA is a good way to, or it also kind of gives us a checklist in and of itself, right? That as long as it's, especially the outcome part of it, that if it's not going to get us, as you said in the beginning, closer to that particular outcome, then it probably does not need to be a meeting. And this can give us a good structure to get into. And other
Yes, and
aspect,
I,
yeah,
I
go
want
ahead.
to clarify just one bit there. And I make this slip as well, which is an unfortunate slip when I'm teaching it. It's output, not outcome, because the outcome can have consequences beyond the meeting. The outcome can be something that affects individuals or a team or a business or a project. The output is the very specific thing that you leave the meeting having created. The output is something that you create. And it's a very small difference, but it makes it much easier to do things like keep on track, find out if your meeting's going to produce what it needs, because you can say, do I have that output that I need? So just a clarification, but if anyone's using these terms, make sure you think output instead of outcome.
Fantastic. Yes, I think those small words do make a massive difference in terms of how we perceive them and hence how we act on them. So thanks
Yeah.
for clarifying that. And another thing that I want to talk about is you also have mentioned in the book about the 5 stages. So can you talk a little more about what those 5 stages are? Because I think that will help us if I am someone who's organizing a particular meeting, then while TPO can help me and give me a framework on in terms of how do I structure the meeting in my mind and have the end goal in mind, I think the 5 stages will also help me to moderate the meeting more effectively. So can you tell me a little more about that?
Yes. So the 5 stages, and I chuckle a little bit because they are so simple. The 5 stages, the first and the last are before and after the meeting. So you've got before the meeting and then after. And in the middle, you've got the start, during, and end of the meeting. Now, it might sound a little oversimplified, or you might think, well, why do I need those 5 stages? Well, here's why. And here's how TPO fits into each of them. Before you have the meeting, do you know your topic, your purpose, and the output? And if you don't, it goes back to that earlier set of checklist criteria of, do I know what I want to produce in the meeting? If you don't have TPO, you don't know what you want to do in the meeting, so you're not ready to have it. But also in that sort of before the meeting stage, stage 1 of 5, you need to think about, who am I inviting? What are the activities? How much time do I need? What tools or environment do I need to do this? Have I got people in one place physically, or are they all in different locations? If you have a clear topic, purpose, and output, you can then evaluate every person you invite. Are they necessary, and can they contribute to that purpose? If your meeting purpose is to make a decision, do you have the decision maker on the list of attendees? So TPO helps you validate your attendees. It helps you choose the right activities, because often we'll go into a meeting and it'll be, we need to prioritize which of these 2 or 3 things we're going to do. But then there's no structure for how do you prioritize. You need to make sure everyone knows what the things are. You need to have criteria to make a decision against. And then you need some kind of decision-making criteria. Pradeep, is it just you making the decision by yourself? Or are we voting? Are we doing it as a collective? Are there different weights? So all of those things, you can only make an informed choice about the way you're going to do what you need to in the meeting if you've got a clear purpose and a desired output. And all of this happens up front before the meeting starts. How much time is it going to take? If you want to do a very physically active sort of stuff on post-it notes around the room as a decision-making process, that's not usually going to be a 20-minute meeting. That needs more time. So all of these things happen in the before stage, and you can make informed choices if you've got that clear topic, purpose, output. Then, when you get into the meeting, you've got that start, during, and end. And when it comes to the start of the meeting, question for you on this, have you ever run from one meeting to another, jumped off a call to get into another call, and you've started a meeting and had to get your head around like what the new meeting is about?
All the time.
All the time, right. So you get into that meeting, and whether you're leading it or you're in it, you need everybody to start focusing. Well, the introduction to the meeting could be topic, purpose, output. And if you've written those in the invitation, which we should have done prior, you can jump off one call, jump into another, read those 3 lines on a page and go, I know what I'm here to do, and I know what I'm going to do and what I'm going to produce at the end. And you tell everybody in 3 lines what that meeting is about, so they are all focused-ish and on the same page. So you've got a very clear introduction that sets the tone for what you're going to do in the meeting. And this is the last bit of explanation I'll do before I pause, is during the meeting, you can only measure progress towards the output if you know what that output is going to be. If you need to come up with 10 ideas, and you've clearly stated that as my output for this meeting, our output for the meeting is 10 ideas. Well, halfway through the meeting, if you've only produced 2, you know you're going to have to change something in the second half, or you're going to have to change what that output is and recognize you're only going to come up with 5. So you can do all of that when you have TPO in each of those 5 stages.
Fantastic. And what about I'm sorry if you've already covered this, but at least I'm not clear on the after part. Can you expand a little on that? On the last
Oh,
stage?
yeah.
Yeah.
So in your meetings, how much time is spent after a meeting, like writing notes or just trying to work out what you should send out after the meeting?
0 minutes.
Okay, so none. Sometimes I get people going, oh, it takes me ages. I got to try and type up everything that happened.
Yeah.
The other end of the scale is nothing. Nothing happens after the
We're so
meeting.
focused on the meeting that after it's done, it's like, oh, okay, now I'm gonna grab some water. I'm gonna get on my other work, right? So you feel like you've done the work, but I know firsthand that it makes a difference in terms of organizing your thoughts after the meeting as well. But I just don't know what exactly to do. So I would love to hear that.
So what do? It depends on that purpose and output. So if the purpose was to make a decision, and that decision is going to impact people, you've got to share the decision. You've got to share the output of that meeting with whomever is impacted. In some cases, meetings don't need minutes. And in all cases, unless you are in court, you don't need a transcript of the conversation. So we have 2 ends of the spectrum. One end is no minutes or notes, and the other is a complete record of everything that was said, which happens a lot now with recorded interviews, recorded meetings online. Who watches 60 minutes of people talking about stuff in a meeting? No one. But AI tools are very good at summarizing them, which is nice. But with those 2 ends of the spectrum, like which one is right? Well, it's better to have something than not in most cases. But better than that is share the output and share any actions that people are expected to take based on that. Here are the next steps. And Pradeep, you committed to doing something by Thursday, and I've committed to doing something by Tuesday. And I'm going to talk to Susanna in accounting about something, and I'll share the input with the team next week. So make sure you've got the output, any decisions, and any actions that were left from the meeting. And then that gives you a to-do list. So if you're the one project managing this, or if you're the one sort of tasked with following up, you've got your list of things to follow up. And you've made sure that everybody else has that list as well. So it's not a surprise when you contact them on Thursday to say, hey, did you do the thing?
Fantastic. So I think the main takeaway is that after a meeting is done, spend time, and this has to be done by just the person who's organized the meeting, right? It's not a shared activity, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, unless somebody's designated to do it,
Designated to
it
do it. Got
should be something that is quick and easy by the person who leads the meeting. And you're
it. Got
just doing a follow-up. Thanks for coming. Here's what we wanted to achieve. We did achieve it. Here's the thing. Here's what happens next.
Perfect. Got it. Fantastic. Yeah, in the book you also talk about the meeting sweet spot. Can you talk a little bit about what that means?
Yes, this was almost the title of the book, but and I'm laughing because it can be quite cruel. So, what is the meeting sweet spot? There are two things that guide a meeting: how rigid the meeting is, and how controlling the meeting leader is. And I plot this on a two-axis scale, and then label the kind of meeting leader that fits into each one. So a meeting can either be like have a really rigid agenda or have absolutely no structure. And a meeting leader can have total and utter control, or it's a complete free-for-all and anything goes. And those are the two biggest variables that determine whether what kind of meeting you end up in. And if you have the sweet spot's in the middle. The sweet spot is where it's not too rigid, you've got some ability to flex, and you're not being too controlling or too relaxed. Because we do need structure as a group to achieve that purpose and produce the output. That's the whole reason that we're taking time out of our days. And the further away from the center, which is that sweet spot, the further away from that you are, the more likely you are to be like a tyrant. If you have a rigid agenda and have total control, you are a meeting tyrant. And if you are the opposite of that, no agenda, complete free for all, you are the Lord of Chaos. And it's just anything goes in these meetings. And so there are 8 different categories and labels that you can have, sort of micromanager, control freak. And it just, most people like to use it to see, oh, my boss is this, or so and so is that. But I challenge everybody to think of it as a self-reflection tool. I was very much on the micromanaging side. Certainly early in my career, I wanted all the details. I was on the controlling side. And it's just a fun way to say, okay, what are my sort of extreme characteristics in meetings? And then how can I bring it back to add a little more flexibility or add a little more structure if you happen to be more carefree?
I think the meeting sweet spot in that case is a lot, not so much about the meeting, but a lot more about the person moderating the meeting. Would that be fair to say?
Yes, yes, it is. Yeah,
Got it.
that's
And
yeah, it's a much better description. I shall add that at the beginning next time.
fantastic. And talking about the person who's moderating the meeting, could you? So I remember from back in my days working in a job, there was this my very no, not my first, my second boss was this lady. Her name is Anna, and she was a very hard taskmaster. And in a
Mhm.
meeting, she was very, very good at managing the room. So it was her job to ensure that she was the sales head. It was her job to get the best creatives in the room and to get the best ideas from them and to filter out the bad ones. That was her job.
Mm.
And the way she was able to, as you said, right, control the meeting as well as give everyone the floor because the ideas are not coming from her. She has to give the floor to the creatives as well. But the way she was able to orchestrate that entire affair was, at least when I looked at it, I found it very, very appealing from a meetings perspective. And if I were to ask you that, what if you were able to list a few qualities of a good meeting moderator, what would they be? One of them being to be in the meeting sweet spot. What else can we add to the list?
Yeah, being able to adapt to the particular meeting. So some meetings are crisis situations. Something's happened. We need to react. We've got to do this fast, or something is going to blow up. That requires a different style from, hey, we're looking for ideas and we're looking for new stuff and we're looking for input from everybody. They have two very different time frames, different dynamics, different impact for what's happening in the meeting. So being able to, as a leader, being able to adapt to the purpose, to the audience, to the urgency is really important. Because if every meeting is urgent and must be done and go dum 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 dum, that's not every moment of a job. And if it is, gosh, that's a tough place to work. So being flexible. The second thing is, as the leader or the facilitator of a meeting, you have to pay attention to the people in the room. And to get more specific, you have to start to become a student of body language. If 4 out of 6 people are all leaning in and engaged in the discussion, if the other 2 are sat back in their chairs, arms crossed, looking away or frowning, notice that. Be aware. Pay attention if somebody is dominating the conversation. As the leader, you're the one who's got to create space to draw in other people and say, John, it's great. I'm hearing a lot of great ideas from you today. I'm really interested in what Emma and Steve and Sanjay have to say in response to that. So hang on just a second. Emma, what do you think about what we've just heard? Being able to manage that dynamic and adapt to urgency and purpose make much, much better meeting leaders.
I also feel that another important characteristic of a good meeting leader is also to ensure that the conversation remains in the topic box to follow TPO effectively, right? So
Yes.
how can we as a meeting leader also ensure that a meeting is not going off track in terms of
Yeah.
controlling it? Yeah.
I was looking through some of my old notebooks recently. I keep all the stuff I've written. I'm a bit of a hoarder when it comes to that. But some of my old meeting notebooks, I noticed I was drawing diagrams, and they appear in the book. At the start of the meeting, I draw across the top of the page. I sort of draw a marker for we've started, and then a marker for the end. Like, what are we going to produce come the end? And then as the conversation went along, I would just draw a path and say, how far are we deviating away from like the straight line track to get where we need to be? Because conversations twist and turn. It's never an exact step by step straight line to get to the end. And quite often there's been sort of these huge deviations where we've gone off on tangents or talking about a completely different product, project, whatever it happened to be. And so I had this little visual that would show me when we're sort of deviating further away from this mainline topic. And that's the point that I would then start to ask a question. Say, hey, if I missed something, that's on me. Apologies, but it feels like we're moving away from the thing we came here to do. And sometimes it was right to change, and other times it brought the conversation back on track. So this isn't just for leaders. This is anybody in a meeting. If you feel, if you sort of, whether you do it visually or on a bit of paper as I did, imagine there's a line between the meeting beginning and the end of the meeting with an actual valuable output. And just say, how far away from that line is this conversation going? Is it heading back towards the output or is it veering further away? And then you have a choice as to whether to do something about it.
Fantastic. I think I want to take a hard right and talk a little bit about the interpersonal aspect of meetings as well and move away from the
Mhm.
meeting moderator or leader. Let's talk to the audience who are not currently moderating meetings, but they are just the ones attending it.
Which is most of us.
Which is most of us,
Most of us
exactly.
most of the time. Yeah.
Most of us, most of the times, right? And one question that we get asked very often is that what do I do if I'm interrupted during a meeting? I'm not the moderator, I'm not the most senior person in the room. I'm talking, I'm giving my idea, and then somebody cuts me off. Uh, what do
Yes.
any thoughts on what we can do over there to ensure that we are not so should we just let the situation pass? Because those situations get delicate when a senior
Mm.
is the one who's interrupted us as well, because we have to be slightly delicate with the words that we're using in that case. Any thoughts over there in
Yes.
terms of what we can do?
Yes, I like that you gave a specific example there because it will be different in different situations. So if I've been talking and I've been brief and I've been clear, so that's on me. If I've been brief and clear and a senior person interrupts me, first of all, I have to listen for why they've interrupted me. Have they given a good reason? Have they explained it? Or are they just like treading on me because it is their show? If there is a power dynamic of it is the leader who is just, oh, I'm bored of this, I'm moving on, you're not going to be able to address that easily in the meeting. What you can do is give a physical signal and say, sorry, I hadn't quite finished. Can I just finish this thought so I complete my thing? So you ask, so really it's a polite way of showing I hadn't finished, but you're also open to them saying, no, we're moving on. So it's a question. I hadn't, statement first, I hadn't quite finished my thought. Can I please finish this? And then we can talk about your response. If they are dominating you, that might not work. If they're not dominating you, and if you've been clear and concise, that kind of sentence will usually help you. If you haven't been clear, if you've been running on and rambling, the room is less likely to allow you more time. So there's got to be some self-awareness of have you really made a clear point? And at that point, you can say, hi, sorry, I realize I was going on for a while. Can I have 30 seconds to summarize my point so it's clear? So you've got to have that self-awareness and then try and wrap up the thought.
Got it.
There are some great resources, and this happens a lot with ladies. It's a big topic, certainly in the US and Western Europe, of ladies being spoken over and being interrupted. And I will share with you the resource afterwards. I don't have it to hand, but there is some great advice for what to do in those situations that include some of the gender dynamics as well. And one
Gotcha.
of the powerful things we can do is thank the person as they do it. So thank you for getting involved. I'm just going to finish my comment and then we can follow up.
Mm,
So you acknowledge, you don't push back. It's grateful, but it's also you own it. Thanks. Thank you. I just need a moment to finish this, and then I'd love to hear what you think about it.
gotcha. Perfect. I love that. I love that. So we acknowledge them, and then we make them aware that they interrupted us, but nicely, and then we get
Yes.
back to our point. Fantastic.
Yes.
I'm gonna continue this side of the conversation, which is the
Yeah.
interpersonal side of it. And forgive me if I'm going a little away from the crux of the book as such, but it's still going to be around
That's
meetings
okay.
itself, right?
That's
So
okay.
one thing that we get, so this was one question that we get asked very often. It's a little difficult to answer this question because, as you mentioned, it's a very subjective matter overall, and it also involves other people's egos, which makes the matter even more subjective, right? Depending on the person who's actually
Mm,
interrupting you. And to talk about more interpersonal moments like that, one other question that we get asked often, and tell me if you've experienced this, especially in your early career or corporate days, that when you're young or when you're at a junior position and you're put into a meeting, sometimes you're put into a meeting from a learning perspective, from a shadowing perspective,
mhm.
or you are put into a meeting from an ideation perspective that, hey, we don't know if you're going to be able to add value, but come here because your qualifications say so. And if you can give a good idea, that's fantastic. And a lot of people do have those good ideas to give, but they're feeling
Oh yeah.
nervous to speak up. And
Mm,
they stay in this box for really long in their careers, that they don't take opportunities and meetings to speak up, even if they do have something valuable to say, purely out of fear of public speaking, nervousness, the fear of blanking out, whatever it might be.
yeah.
Do you have any thoughts or any advice to that person, that if you have an idea, what can that you should speak up, that's the crux of it? So any thoughts or ideas over there?
Yes, you've given the advice, which is you should speak up. And that's so easy to say and incredibly difficult to do because we've got positional power. I'm the most junior person in the room. I that gives self-doubt. No one's going to think of this. Surely someone would have thought of it before, or it's not my turn to speak, or I haven't been asked. The the first thing each of us needs to do is recognize that we've been invited there for a reason to contribute. If we don't contribute when we could, we are wasting time in those meetings. So the start has to come from within. But to be a little more practical, there are some things that I've seen in my teams in the past, whether I was leading them or part of them. I worked with a chronically shy person who was wickedly smart, but they also had a very pronounced stammer or stutter. So it took them a long time to get the words out. So they came up with an idea where they would write their idea down and give it to someone else who they knew was confident at sharing the idea on the condition that they were named as, hey, this is an idea from so and so. And this can work if you're willing to sort of share these ideas. You can have someone read it out as though it's their idea, and then it gets raised later on. Oh, this came from Sanjay. So it doesn't have to start with, oh, Sanjay would like to say, because that's weird. But it would be, oh, so I'm more confident to speak. So hey, here's some contribution. Have we thought about this? Why don't we try this? Little bit of conversation in the meeting. Go, yeah. So this idea originally came from Sanjay. So you're crediting the person and getting the idea out. So anyone who's really, really shy can try that. The next step up is it's the classic hands up. I mean, if that's culturally appropriate, just a little symbol to show. Doesn't have to be sort of high school. I got my arm all the way up, but just a little visual signal that you'd like to say something, and then it's that sort of adapts to the power dynamic in the room and the hierarchy. And
Gotcha.
I've been in a situation like this. I was really early in my career. I was working for an organization in Europe, and I was sent to Korea to deliver some bad news for a telephone company, mobile phone company called Samsung. May have heard of it. They do TVs as well. And I was 22, 23, and I looked like I was about 15 at the time. And my job at that point was to go and deliver this bad news. I was sat in a meeting room with senior vice presidents of the whole of Samsung's screen technology at the time. And they turned to the older person in the room with me and would talk just to this older person, even though I was the designated expert on that topic. And because culturally I didn't understand the dynamics of the two very different business cultures, I was making sort of signs that I wanted to speak. I would start to talk. I'd make sort of very clear body language. And the most senior person on my side just looked at me and just with a very slight shake of the head and a little hand signal told me to wait. So that I didn't speak when I wasn't supposed to. And later on, they explained to me what would happen, and they explained why. And then that gave me an opportunity to pass them my idea so they could bring it into the room. So all kinds of cultural dynamics, and I've been definitely on the end of putting my foot in it. And then by the end of that time, I'd established credibility and I'd been introduced with enough credibility that I could interject in those sessions when I felt it was appropriate. There's a real learning dynamic over a very short period of time.
That makes sense. I have one final question on the interpersonal side, and then I have my final question for this podcast as well. The last question on the interpersonal side is the rapport building part. So one thing that we talk about is when you begin a meeting, how much time should you spend on pleasantries and catching up and hi, hello, how are you? How the wife and kids and everything? And how often should you directly dive into the meeting? Of course, it's a subjective matter, but any thoughts on that side of it? That is there a correct amount of time that we need to spend? Is it better to just dive into it? What does that look like for you?
Wouldn't it be nice if there was a chart you could consult and say,
Yeah.
oh, here's the number of number of minutes. It's Here's a guideline to go with. The better you know the people in the room and the lower the urgency of the topic, the more time you can spend on the social relationship dynamic at the beginning.
Mm, yeah.
The other end of the scale is if nobody knows each other, then you need to be very clear if the purpose of the meeting is get to know each other, then you're going to spend some time on it. If the purpose of the meeting is to solve a critical problem and we've pulled 7 people from across the organization, get to the work quickly. So how
Yes.
well you know the people and how urgent the situation will determine what's appropriate.
I love that. That's a great framework in itself. That clears a lot of doubts around this particular point. Awesome. I I said this would be the last question, but I actually have two more questions I want to ask you.
Okay.
So one is what so in the book you do talk about AI, and I think people are interested to know about it. You do
Mm.
mention that there are certain things AI, at least as of now, cannot fix about meetings, and there are certain things it can help with. So what are your thoughts on what it can help with and certain things that it can't currently help with?
Yeah, so it can help with note taking and summarizing what the meeting was about. Excellent for that. There's a tool called Yodlee, Yoodli, which can tell you can get a pop-up on your screen if you're doing a virtual meeting that tells you you've been talking too long. It's wonderful. Like you get these sort of alerts that will just pop up and say you're monologuing, or you're doing certain things like you're not using good body language. There's some really powerful stuff that can help you in those meetings. What it can't do currently is it can't tell you if your meeting is on track. There's nothing there at the moment that tells you whether the meeting is on track. And what I don't believe the AI will ever be able to do is tell you what your meeting should be about. It can't plan your meeting for you because it doesn't know the topic, purpose, and output that you have, that your team needs to do. It can help you pick great activities. It can help you avoid the wrong activities like brainstorming. But it can't tell you what you need to do in the meeting. So we, as the employees, as the humans, still own that bit. And while we have jobs, we will always own that bit.
Fantastic. The tool he mentioned, the tool that Chris mentioned, Udly, there are that's one tool. There are a lot of AI tools around speech and that you can install, especially if you're doing virtual meetings as well. Immensely helpful. I've used a bunch of them myself. They also help you with filler words and clarity of speech. So try it out. I think all of these have a free version and a paid version as well. And getting to
Yes.
the virtual side of meetings, that's my final question for you. I am a complete remote worker. I believe so are you. And there are, I've been trying to figure out a lot of things in terms of how I can make virtual meetings better. And I feel I always end up falling short because I don't know where to start really. And a lot of videos I've seen online have not been the most helpful. So I would love to hear from you in terms of number one, some general tips you might have to make virtual meetings more effective. And number two, you have been in this is, I think, the second or third virtual meeting we've had. Do you have any blunt feedback for me that I can utilize to make my virtual meeting or presence better? So these are my two
Yeah.
questions for you. What are your thoughts?
All right. So I'll tie them together. The first thing is audio over video. We can forgive bad video. In fact, you can turn your video off. We can't forgive bad audio because without that, there's no communication. And your audio is great. So really good. Oh, nice. There's a clip on there. I have a little lapel one as well. These are great mics, well worth a small investment. The there's something that we can all do, and this is an unusual piece of advice, but it's so important. And Vincent Yang does this. He's a great communications guy, really good, compelling content as well. And he will bring someone on stage with him. He'll do these physical events, and he will demonstrate one of the biggest, most common mistakes we make with virtual meetings. That is why so many of us have our cameras off, and I'm going to see if I can demo it. So he'll put someone on stage and he'll walk towards them and he'll have dropped down. So I've disappeared off the edge and then he will come up like this. and it's really close in, and it's such an invasion of personal space. We sit too close to our cameras. We sit too close to our cameras, and it does two things. One is it's like somebody's sitting right up next to you, and it's uncomfortable because it's far too close. The second thing is we lose all the other body language. So at this point, you can see my hands as though we were sitting at a desk opposite each other. You can tell what I'm doing. I can be more expressive. But if I'm right up close on the camera, it doesn't matter what I'm doing with my hands. I'm actually waving them around like this a lot, but you can't tell any of that. So we lose those visual cues that are ingrained into how we interpret other people's intentions, honesty, the real meanings in their messages. So for everybody who is on a virtual meeting, sit back a little bit. And this brings us back to the microphone piece. If you sit back on a Zoom call, your voice gets cut out because it cuts out all the background noise. So you have to be close enough for the mic. So you've got to make sure you've got the microphone, but just sit back a bit. And it's then as though you're sitting around a table, not sitting in each other's laps.
Fantastic. There's one more thing that I think I don't know which communication expert spoke about, but he mentioned this as well, that if you want to understand whether you're really close to the camera or not, a good rule of thumb is the head to screen ratio. So if your head is touching
Yeah.
the screen, then this is probably not the best thing. So you want to, if you notice, mine is not that good. If you notice Chris's frame right now, it's perfect in terms of the head to screen distance that he has, which makes him perfectly visible in terms of his body language and his
Here's
expressiveness overall.
Well, thank you. It's nice to know that the setup works. I think it's Justin or Jason. There's an Australian guy who talks about this quite a lot, and he does really good video content. The rule of thumb is you should be able to see it, ideally, if when your arms are by your sides, you should be able to just see the elbow, like the bend in your arm should be at the bottom of the screen. And then for your distance from the top, close your fist and put it on the top of your head. And that should make the distance between the screen and not. There you
Oh my
go.
God, I was way too close, is what I'm realizing now when you
Yeah,
made me do it. Oh, this makes a huge difference. Yeah, because
doesn't it?
I was like, I was here before. So
Yeah,
this is I'm folding my arms right now. It's not gonna work. So yeah,
yeah.
that's a great litmus test to understand what the distance should be. And I think most of the people we train and most of the people we talk to are remote workers now. I think that's it. In case you're just hearing this podcast, please come and watch what he just did right now, because it also opened my eyes right now in terms of the distance I should be keeping. And it'll also, if you have not done it already, it'll also urge you to go get an external microphone, because there's no way from this distance, if I'm using my laptop microphone, will my voice be that clear? That's
Yeah.
fantastic. I love it.
And then an external keyboard, because you've got dynamics there. You can't type on your laptop like with your
Yeah.
arms at full stretch. So there are some physical, practical elements. But even just then, when you leant back in your chair, it changed the framing of you so much more. And we have a natural revulsion to people being right up in our faces. Unless we want to kiss them, we don't want anyone right up in our face. And it's awkward seeing a bunch of people on a screen where they're all really close in. So that's one of the reasons people put their cameras off, because they don't like dominating a screen that way as well. So just sit back, and then we can have our cameras on and we can see the body language, and oddly put a bit more distance between you and the other people, and it gets a lot more comfortable.
Fantastic. Perfect. I think I'm done. I mean, I can talk to you about this for a really long time, but I think I'll respect your time and pause it over here. Please let me know if you have any final thoughts. Talk a little bit about the book in terms of where we all can find it, and anything else that you would like to use this platform for. Please go ahead.
Okay, well, thank you. You can find me at chrisfenning.com. LinkedIn is sort of my social hangout. And the book is Effective Meetings, and it is available wherever you like to buy books. So it's short, it's practical, it's also full of pictures, diagrams, and it's printed in color, which is my first color book, which I'm quite excited about. So, yeah, and if you have problems, if you want your team to be better at meetings, let me know. I run trainings in person and online.
Fantastic. And they can find the details on that on your website, correct?
On my website, yep. And get in touch with me. A conversation is usually better than just scrolling on a page. So I make time for everyone.
Fantastic. And he mentioned his book is short and sweet. That's all his books, by the way. They're very crisp and concise. So make sure when you pick up Effective Meetings, pick up the other books as well. I think you need one weekend to read them, but you'll need years to implement them. So keep picking up one of them at each time, and every book will be packed with very practical communication frameworks, which is why his books are at the top of my list in terms of recommendations for communication books. Having said that, thank you so much, Chris. It's always a pleasure to speak to you. And I hope you guys got some valuable tips in terms of running effective meetings. I'll see you guys next time.
I really hope you enjoyed and got some value out of this interview. If you like such communications content, hit subscribe and check out Chris's book on effective meetings. If you want to see another video we've made with Chris, another interview on his previous book, The First Minute, which helps you communicate in a concise manner, you can check out that whole video right here.